Bill Gross is the founder of Idea Lab, a Silicon Valley incubator. He gave a phenomenal TED Talk about 10 years ago where he identified the top reasons why startups succeed. Was it the product concept or service idea? Or the leadership team? How about the business model itself? Or the amount of funding they had? Well, it was none of those things. Want to know what it was? Welcome to the Next Level Executive Podcast, a show dedicated to dentists who want to evolve from a clinician who owns a practice into an executive who leads a business. I'm your host, Perrin Desports. If you own a practice that generates over $1 million in revenue and you're wondering what's next, you're in the right place. The power of Bill Gross's TED Talk is that the number one reason he identified for why startups succeed is the one reason of the 5 you can't control. They looked at product concept or service idea, they looked at leadership teams, they looked at the business models, and they certainly looked at funding. All of those are, at least to a degree, within your control. The 5th variable that they examined is not in your control. And the 5th variable is the one that mattered most: timing. That's right, the point in time when the startup hits the market, the one thing you can't control. Too early, and you have to educate the market because it's not ready for the product or service yet. If you're too late, then that means there are probably too many competitors and it's already a race to the bottom. However, if you find yourself at the right place and the right time, it's more frequently described as luck. But that timing is what matters most. Think about service companies and product companies like Airbnb. Airbnb came out during the recession, and people ended up using their largest asset, their home, to make money. Think about Uber. Uber also hit during an economic downturn, where more people were marginally employed, underemployed, or unemployed, and they could make money at any time of the day with the one asset they still had, their automobile. Think about YouTube when it hit. It hit at a point in time when more than 50% of the homes in the United States recently acquired broadband access. These are all wonderful companies that we know, love, and probably use quite often. And all of them were unique in their timing. Now, one thing that Bill Gross doesn't really talk about is that the entrepreneur himself or herself has to be aware enough of what's going on around them to take full advantage of the luck they enjoy. And all of us can look back in hindsight at opportunities we failed to take advantage of or realize on and say, man, how did I miss that one? I've missed my fair share, and I know that you have too. Whether you realize it or not, your moment in time has arrived. So last week, I shared an episode on something I call zombie DSOs. And in that episode, I talked about the whisper numbers in the industry being somewhere between 50 and 70 private equity-backed DSOs that can't recap, and they also can't acquire any more practices, or at least they can't acquire practices at the rate they once did. This is a tremendous opportunity waiting. There's a stall in the top end of the market as it relates to M&A activity, and that will percolate down throughout the industry. As private equity-backed DSOs get stuck in a perpetual unfulfilled recap cycle, that also means they can't go back to business as usual, and business as usual is typically mergers and acquisitions. So nothing happens. Nothing happens on their end, at least. But does that mean nothing happens in the rest of the industry? Absolutely not. And therein lies the opportunity. We think a lot about the incoming flow of dentists into the profession. And the last statistics I had seen from the American Dental Education Association was that more than 80% of dental graduates are carrying some amount of student loan debt. And for those who do, the average is in excess of $300,000 per person. Needless to say, there are not a lot of them that are going to be acquiring practices anytime soon either. But there's still a large number of senior dentists who are looking to exit the profession in the next 5 to 10 years. So you need to ask yourself, who's going to buy their practice? Now, one of the other things I said last week was that I felt the gold rush ended in 2019 and that we were in a new era of what I was calling fool's gold. Those senior dentist sellers who are approaching retirement all know someone who sold their practice or their emerging group to a private equity-backed DSO. For most of them, it didn't turn out very well. Now those same senior dentists who are about to be sellers are questioning their opportunity at hand and whether or not a private equity-backed DSO is the right exit strategy for them. Now it's about much more than just the dollars involved. There's reputational risk at stake as well. If this is the era of fool's gold for private equity-backed DSOs, then it's also the new era of the currency of trust for each of you. Those would-be sellers are going to be walking up to a line where they have a question they have to answer for themselves. Who do I trust to be a steward of my life's work? Who do I trust to be a steward of my legacy? I think you and I would agree that there are a lot of senior sellers who've built a lifetime career that they're very proud of, a practice that they're very proud of, a team and a patient base that they feel strongly about. This is not transactional for them. Yes, the money does in fact matter, but their legacy matters every bit as much. This currency of trust that I'm talking about is between you and them. You are ideally suited to capitalize on this stall in private equity-backed DSO M&A activity. I also said last week that I don't believe building a group is the right step for everyone. I've seen too many people's egos write checks that their banks couldn't cash. And ultimately, I know their families paid the price for it. So I have a series of questions for you. The first is, are you driven by ego? I've worked really hard in the recent months to identify my audience. And I know those in my coaching program, and I know that not one of them is driven by ego. I don't believe the vast majority of you are either. So if you're not driven by ego, what is your driving force? What's your ambition? Better yet, what's your aspiration? What do you want to really become? You need to take a few minutes and contemplate those questions. What's your driving force? What's your ambition? Quantifiably, where do you want to end up? Aspirationally, what's your purpose in life? What do you want your business to do, and how do you want it to complement the life that you lead? Ultimately, what do you want to become out of all of this? There are basically two significant mindsets that brought us into this era of the zombie DSO. And the two mindsets are fear and impatience. Fear. Coming out of 2020 and 2021, there was the global pandemic. Everyone was scared literally to death about a lot of things, and justifiably so. We were scared and we had fear about things we couldn't control. We had fear of an unknown future in terms of how our businesses would return to form, or if they even would. And some of you had a fear of missing out. Those who operate out of fear tend to play defense. They have a scarcity mindset and they play not to lose. I'm not defending anything, and I'm surrounded by people who are playing to win. None of them are missing out on anything. because they're creating the future they want. Frankly, it's beautiful to see, and it's wonderful that I get to experience it up close and personal on a weekly basis. The second mindset to confront is that of impatience. Impatient people typically make bad decisions because they self-impose time constraints when there aren't any. Let me say that again. Impatient people typically make bad decisions because they self-impose time constraints when there aren't any. Here's a little secret. You can't build a 5-location group in the next 12 months. But could you do it if I gave you 10 to 20 years? Why do you insist upon making decisions in haste when you have ample time to get it right according to the criteria you set forth? When you have the opportunity to get it right according to the criteria at your discretion, you control all of that. If there's one thing I'm proud of in terms of my own personal leadership maturity the last several years, it's that I always consider time frame and timing of the major decisions I make. And you should as well. Timing means thoughtful considerations of how I size up what's happening in the market and then in the economy around me. Time frame means how long I should take to make the decision at hand, and then also, where will I be in the coming years as the repercussions of that decision play out? If there's one key takeaway from today's episode that you should contemplate, dwell on, and consider, it would be to improve your decision-making power in terms of time frame and timing. I also consider the other people who I should engage for research, guidance, and perspective, and you should do the same. If you want to build a business that's congruent with your life, you don't need 50 locations to do it. You really don't even need 5. If your ambition is to create a lifestyle business that generates over $1 million in personal free cash flow, you can probably do it in 3 or 4 relatively high-performing practices. And I teach those fundamentals in the Foundation program every week. If you spent a year preparing for growth, then acquired a practice and successfully integrated it and improved it over the next 3 to 4 years, then did that same thing a second time or even a third time over the subsequent 4 or 5 years, could you end up with a 3 or a 4 location group in 10 to 15 years' time that generates the free cash flow you desire? I think you have the opportunity to do that if you want to, if it meets the risk tolerance of the time frame ahead of you. And if your aspiration is to create a business that grants you the freedom of time and purpose, the true freedom of time and purpose to pursue other interests outside of dentistry, then you'd fit perfectly in our executive group, because that's the road many of them are on right now too. Again, I think you have the opportunity to do that. There's a rather simple future commitment to make. I don't care if you add additional practices or if you stand pat where you are. But if you're mid-career, your commitment to yourself has to be one of personal growth, self-improvement, and professional development. Invest in your own professional development to better equip yourself to handle the changes of the coming decade. It'll be filled with a ton of opportunity of all sorts, but only if you're equipped to take advantage of those opportunities. Put another way, what good is it to be next to a river of salmon swimming upstream if you don't know how to fish? Many of you heard me say that early on in my career, I was the beneficiary of several people who invested in me to mold me into a better leader, who took me under their wing and mentored me. Unfortunately, none of you will be so lucky because you all sit at the top of your own org chart. I was lucky because I didn't seek it out. others sought me out. They saw something in me that I didn't understand and didn't see in myself. And they took the first step to mentor me, to guide me, to mold me into being a better leader. I would want every bit the same for each and every one of you. But I also recognize that there's no one who sits above you who's going to do that. My point is really this: nobody's going to invest in you unless you invest in yourself. And only you can decide if you're truly worth it. I know most everyone in my executive program listens to this podcast in addition to consuming a lot of weekly content from me. They're all making a massive investment in their own professional development. And it's really gratifying for me to see, to watch them evolve as leaders of their businesses. And I'm going to ask of each and every one of them who are in the program, do you have a friend or a colleague you know who needs to hear this episode? A friend or a colleague who should be on the same journey that you're on? If so, for those in the executive program, please share it with them. And for everyone else in the audience, if you feel that my guidance is valuable to you, scroll down to the bottom of your app and leave a rating or a review of the show. It would really mean a lot to me. By now, I hope that you can all understand why I'm so confident about the coming 5 to 10 years in your profession. You're going to have a lot of very large opportunities to swing at, and frankly, a lot of very big decisions to make. But there's one decision that, in my opinion, is the biggest of them all. And we'll dive into that one together on the next episode. If you're wondering what's next for you and your business, the answer's waiting for you on the Next Level Executive Podcast.
This podcast was edited by Resonate Recordings.